Welcome to the Plant Strong podcast. I'm Rip Esselstyn, and first of all, I want to extend my best wishes for health and safety to all of you and your loved ones. I also want to thank you for all of the kind messages that you've been sending me and my family. It is communities and extended families like this one here at Plant Strong by Engine 2 that will continue to make such a huge difference in our well-being and collective connectedness. During this time of uncertainty, we are more committed than ever to bring you the science, the facts, and answers to all of your health questions. We recently put the call out, and you responded in a huge way. And this week, we're going to go straight to the top with a question and answer session with my father, Dr. Caldwell B. Esselstyn Jr. Now, a little update on them. Like most of us, my father and my mother are currently practicing social distancing from their home in Cleveland, Ohio. So we recorded this over Zoom, and I'm sure that many of you are becoming very well acquainted with Zoom and the technological challenges that are inherent in the platform. But whatever lack of quality there is in the recording, I want you to know that it'll be made up in spades with the information and the answers that my father provides to your questions, ranging from cholesterol, how to order food at restaurants, the effects of caffeine on the body, the importance of 6 servings of green leafies a day, and of course, nitric oxide, and a whole lot more. Enjoy this always educational conversation with my father, Dr. Esselstyn. So, strange times are upon us right now. I'd love to, let me just start by saying, for this episode of the Plant Strong podcast, I thought it would be really nice to have you on board, especially considering everything that's going on right now. And along with talking a little bit about COVID-19, I'd like for you to answer some questions that some of our podcast listeners have sent in. So just to start, COVID-19, coronavirus, what are your thoughts surrounding this very kind of unsettling virus that right now is sweeping the world?
Yeah, COVID-19 has really got civilization by the throat. It's really kind of it's a rather vicious virus, which is highly contagious. And since it makes people ill and some of the more seniors can be seriously ill, it really has got everybody's attention. And it seems that when you have these sort of pandemic situations, the best that everybody can do is to try to use this social distance, that is to really avoid the crowds and interactions, because that's how it's obviously how it is spread. So we'll just have to follow the directions, the instructions of our experts, and really take it on a week by week basis.
Mm-hmm. What are?
But certainly, all the things like the hand washing, the avoiding the crowds, avoiding shaking hands, and these are all very important.
Mm-hmm. So what in particular are you and Anne doing?
Staying hydrated and staying isolated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And do you have any thoughts about eating a whole food plant-based diet and how that can help with the immune system and all that?
Yes, you want to keep your immune system optimal, and that's certainly going to help fend off any of these infectious agents. But there again, we go to the emphasis on the green leafy vegetables and a nice rounded spectrum of whole grains, legumes, all the red, yellow, and green leafy vegetables, and some wavy white potatoes, sweet potatoes, and some fruit. And you've got the foundation for all those wonderful recipes that are in your book, in our book, and Jane and Mummy's book, and John McDougall's books, and Neil Barnard's books, and so there's a lot of information out there.
Yeah. Well, so have you heard this whole term about flattening the curve?
Yes.
Right. And can you explain from what you've read and understand what flattening the curve means exactly and why this will help us out?
Well, each culture has a certain limitation on the facilities that they have to contend with the virus. And if you can kind of keep from having that tremendous surge in cases which occurs where you have a huge amount of illness all at once, that's the surge, and that's what overwhelms the ability of people to care for these patients. And that's what one has to really try to avoid. And that's the whole emphasis in this social distancing, because when you isolate, you tend to avoid these surges, and you do not overwhelm the healthcare facilities of the particular culture. You have a much better time and a better opportunity to deal with this virus till it runs its course.
Mm-hmm. I listened to a 30-minute podcast the other day called Daily, where they talk about all the different things that South Korea and China are doing right now when it comes to doing massive testing, quarantining. And when you quarantine people, you're quarantining them with other sick people as opposed to sending them home to get loved ones exposed as well. And I'm just wondering, we're doing a lot of things right with the social distancing and washing hands and all that, but I'm wondering if that's enough. And I guess maybe time will tell. I think that maybe here in America we feel it's too draconian and too extreme. But to me at this point, it's like, hey, anything goes at this point to prevent this thing from spreading.
Right.
So if you're cool with it, what I'd love to do is dive into some questions that some of our podcast listeners have sent in. You ready to go?
Yeah. Let's see what you got.
All right. So this first question is, aside from turmeric, what other foods and spices do you recommend for inflammation? I'm a 2-time cancer fighter and dealing with lymphedema. Hoping I can start to fight this stronger through food, if at all possible. Thank you very much, Dr. Esselstyn.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. As far as inflammation, when you have the whole grains, when you have all the 101 different types of legumes, lentils, and beans, all those marvelous red, yellow, green leafy vegetables, white potatoes, sweet potatoes, and some fruit, you've got the entire spectrum of the benefit of all these. There's no one single magic food that's going to deliver a deliverance from the inflammatory problem. It's the entire spectrum. And when you really see this working its magic, is when you look at people who come in with, let's say, an elevated calcium score on the coronary arteries, and they're concerned because they don't know what's going to happen. Let's say that they've got a score of 400, and but as I learned years ago from Bill Castelli was for years the director of the world famous Framingham Heart Study, and Castelli said, if you see somebody with a elevated calcium score, let's say 400, that tells us two things. It tells us that the patient has coronary artery disease, and it also tells us that this is somebody who has a lot of non-calcified inflamed plaque that you cannot see. But if the person absolutely gets it right, and over the next year, they're totally committed to whole food, plant-based nutrition, and after, let's say, a year later, they get another calcium score, and it's no longer 400, but now it may be 550. But Castelli says the patient is actually much healthier, much better off, because what has happened during that year, while the patient was consuming the whole food, plant-based nutrition, which is so anti-inflammatory, those previously non-calcified inflamed plaque, which were more dangerous for rupturing and causing a heart attack, are losing rapidly. They're losing their inflammation, he says, and it is as though the body is trying to get in on the act and will deposit some calcium in those previously non-calcified inflamed plaque to try to hasten the diminution of their calcium, of their inflammation, and make it so they cannot rupture or cause a heart attack.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And if you didn't know what was going on,
yeah, you'd think you were getting worse.
You think you were getting worse. And how many cardiologists actually also know what's going on there?
No, I think that the unknowing cardiologist will absolutely steer you in the wrong direction there. They have to understand that that's what can happen, especially when patients go on whole food, plant-based nutrition. Their calcium score is likely to go up.
Right. So in summary, turmeric is great, but it's the totality of a whole food, plant-based diet that will really help fight the inflammation.
That's your answer.
No, wonderful. All right, here's a question. Dr. Esselstyn, did you find any evidence with your patients that this way of eating improves or reverses diabetes?
Oh yeah, all the time. I mean, one of the things you see very promptly, especially in patients who are on insulin, as they start following their morning blood sugars, they're going to have to really be on their toes, because they improve so rapidly that as they check their morning blood sugar, I don't want it to suddenly be too far below 100. I don't want them to be at risk for getting a hypoglycemic episode. But everybody, as they follow their morning blood sugars, once they transition to whole food, plant-based nutrition, they're going to suddenly see that morning blood sugar, instead of being 130, 120, 110, suddenly it's 100 or less. And they're really improving. What happens is that as they eat whole food, plant-based nutrition, immediately what happens is as they lose weight, the fat, which has been deposited in their muscle cells, intramyocellular fat, as it were, that fat in the muscle cells has been like glue in the lock, and it has been preventing the insulin being able to escort the glucose into the muscle cell to be metabolized. But once the person starts losing weight and is eating whole food, plant-based nutrition, once again, the pathway is open. That is to say, the insulin can turn the key in the lock, as it were, and now once again escort the glucose into the muscle cell to be metabolized. And that's when their blood sugar comes down, their diabetes begins to be reversed.
And how quickly would you say that this starts to happen?
Oh, within days. Within days.
Right. Well, that's completely in alignment with what we see at our immersion
Whole
programs.
Foods.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, here's a question from a 51-year-old perimenopausal woman, and she says, Dr. Esselstyn, I have been diagnosed with anemia, and I am finding it hard to find information on eating whole food, plant-based while battling this particular condition. Everything that I read says I need to eat red meat and lots of it. What would you say to this woman?
Well, when you have a profound anemia, especially in someone who is still a perimenopausal woman, meaning she still is having active menstrual activity, sometimes the menstrual activity is such a significant blood loss that the loss of iron is sufficient significantly greater than the iron they're taking in, that they will get anemia. So the first thing you want to do with anemia that is really of iron deficiency is look for a loss. Now, if it's a male, you want to be sure that they aren't losing blood in the stool. That is, they may have a small amount of gastritis or an ulcer, which is bleeding subliminally. As it bleeds a fair amount, the stool will become dark or tarry. But the thing that I'm driving at here, both of men and women, is to be sure that they aren't having an excess of blood loss, which is going to be reflected by this iron deficiency.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But typically, most people on a whole food plant-based diet this shouldn't be an issue, getting all the iron you need from all your green leafies, all your beans, all your whole plant-based foods.
And I think Colin Campbell showed this right profoundly in his China study, how really people eating whole food plant-based nutrition, really given that they're eating the spectrum, are not anemic.
Right. And in my second book, My Beef with Meat, I have a whole chapter on iron, and we talk about the different types of iron in plants versus animals, and how really the iron that's in plants is it's a much more intelligent almost form of iron, where the body actually can dump iron if you have too much iron, as opposed to animal-based iron, which is the heme iron, where the body can't control the iron, and in many people it just builds up and builds up, and it's an oxidative type of iron, correct?
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely. Oxidative inflammation.
Okay, so this is a question you're going to love answering. It's right up your alley. So Dr. Esselstyn Sr. says to put vinegar on steamed greens when getting in those 6 servings a day. I want to know, is the vinegar a part of the recommendation or just to make it more palatable? I prefer the greens plain, but if the vinegar helps the absorption of nutrients, then I'll do it if Dr. Esselstyn says I should do it. Thanks so much.
Well, again, the key molecule, excellent question. The key molecule that we're after here is to restore nitric oxide. Because for all these persons who have vascular disease, the only reason or the main reason that they have vascular disease, and this is an area where all experts are in agreement, vascular disease has its inception, its onset, its beginning, when we progressively injure the delicate innermost lining of the artery called the endothelium. And what makes the endothelium so remarkable is the molecule of gas, nitric oxide, that it is producing. And it is nitric oxide that is responsible for the salvation and the protection of all of our blood vessels because of its remarkable functions.
Can you let everybody know what are some of the functions of nitric oxide?
All right. Well, the functions of nitric oxide, the key ones are: 1, nitric oxide will keep all the cellular elements within our bloodstream flowing smoothly like Teflon rather than Velcro. It keeps things from getting sticky. Number 2, nitric oxide is the strongest blood vessel dilator in the body. When you climb stairs, the arteries to your heart, the arteries to your legs, they widen, they dilate. That's nitric oxide. Number 3, nitric oxide will keep the wall of the artery from becoming thickened, stiff, or inflamed, and protect us from getting high blood pressure or hypertension. Number 4. Now, number 4 is the absolute key. A safe and normal amount of nitric oxide will protect us all from ever developing any blockages or plaque. So literally everybody on the planet Earth, whether they're from London, Berlin, Chicago, New York, or Cleveland, or Cincinnati, if they have cardiovascular disease, it is because by now in the previous decades, they have so sufficiently trashed, injured, compromised, and turned their endothelial system into a train wreck that they no longer have enough nitric oxide left to protect themselves from making blockages and plaque. However, the good news here is this. This is not a malignancy. This is a completely benign foodborne illness. And once you can get those patients to never again have anything pass through their lips that is going to further destroy their capacity of their endothelial cells to make nitric oxide, then the endothelial cells recover, make enough nitric oxide so you no longer have disease progression, and we also see elements of disease reversal. Now, let's come back to the green leafy vegetables for a minute.
And the vinegar, yes.
What is so important there? Because if I can get patients to chew, not smoothies, not juicing, to chew a green leafy vegetable 6 times a day, after it has first been boiled in water 5.5 to 6 minutes so it's nice and tender or steamed, then I like them to anoint it with several drops of a delightful balsamic or rice vinegar. Why? Not only does it add to the little zip to the taste, but most importantly, the acetic acid in the vinegar has been shown to restore the nitric oxide synthase enzyme, which is contained within the endothelial cell and is responsible for making nitric oxide. Now, the second thing that the greens does, the greens restore the capacity of your bone marrow to once again make plenty of endothelial progenitor cells. What do? They replace our senescent, injured, worn out endothelial cells. So you're going to chew this alongside your breakfast cereal, again as a morning snack, again with your luncheon sandwich, that's 3, mid-afternoon, 4, dinner time, 5, and of course I adore it when you have that evening snack of kale. Now, what's the third thing? And this is so absolutely key because this is for seniors, because we have 2 ways of making nitric oxide. And one that's most talked about is, of course, the nitric oxide that is produced by the endothelial cells that line our blood vessels. But sadly, as we get older, by the time you're 50, the ability of your endothelial cells to make nitric oxide, even if you're beautifully healthy, is 50% of what it was when you were 25. And if you're over 80, you've lost 73% of that avenue for making nitric oxide. So here is the second option. When you are chewing those green leafy vegetables, you are actually chewing a nitrate. As you chew a nitrate, it is going to mix with the facultative anaerobic bacteria that reside in the crypts and grooves of your tongue. Those bacteria are going to reduce the nitrate in your mouth that you're chewing to nitrite. Now, when you swallow the nitrite, your own gastric acid is going to further reduce the nitrites to more nitric oxide. So here's what you'll be doing. Literally, without any added expense, without any hideous side effect, all day long you are absolutely restoring the very molecule, nitric oxide, the deficiency of which gave you the heart disease in the first place. Now, what are the greens that I'm talking about? They are.
What are they?
Bok choy, Swiss chard, kale, collard green, beet greens, mustard green, turnip greens, Napa cabbage, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cauliflower, cilantro, parsley, spinach, and arugula, and asparagus. And the top 5 are kale, Swiss chard, spinach, arugula, beet greens, and beets. And look what it does for your memory.
So I have some follow-ups on that. So for this lady that asked this question and is not a huge fan of the balsamic vinegar, would you tell her, yes, it's a good idea to do it because of the acetic acid?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's tasty, it's wonderful, and look what it does for your nitric oxide synthase, which is the enzyme responsible for making nitric oxide.
Okay. The other thing is somebody that I just had on the podcast, the episode has not aired yet. And I know he's a gentleman that you have spoken to on the phone as well. Dr. Nathan Bryan talks about some things that also are impeding the ability.
Yes, they are. If antibiotics or mouthwash will destroy the beneficial bacteria in your mouth, and if you're taking antacids, antacids will alter the gastric acid, so you no longer have enough stomach acid to convert the nitrite to more nitric oxide.
Yeah, yeah. So yep, exactly right. So all these things kind of disrupt that pathway of the ability to turn the nitric oxide pathways. So just to repeat, fluoride toothpaste, mouthwash, and antacids, correct?
All right.
Okay. All right. Wow. All right. That was a great answer there. I want to share a special note today from Dr. Ernie Ward. He's the veterinarian medical officer for Wild Earth dog food that we are very wild about. He wants me to let you know that so far only one case exists of a dog in Hong Kong testing positive for the virus after its family members contracted the disease. But the dog did not exhibit any symptoms indicating that the COVID-19 is a human-specific virus. Now, there does remain a minimal risk that a dog or a cat's fur or skin could serve as a mechanical vector for the COVID-19 transmission, much the same way a door handle or a handshake can spread the infection. Bathing your pet frequently is recommended if anyone in your home contracts COVID-19 after public outings, or if you suspect you might have come in contact with anyone that's ill. And please skip the pet face masks, no matter how many cute pictures you see on social media. Forcing a face mask on your pet will only stress them out, and that's not very cute. If you'd like to have Wild Earth dog food shipped straight to your door, please visit wildearth.com or Amazon and use the code PLANTSTRONG for 40% off your first order. All right, this is a woman that wants to know, you both say not to drink your calories, but I had a more specific question in relation to caffeine and coffee. What are your findings on the effects of caffeine on the body, or even just plain black coffee?
Well, the reason I'm a little bit cautious about people with heart disease drinking coffee with caffeine is I was rather swayed by a wonderful Italian study. And the Italian study did the following. They took two groups of healthy young subjects, and half of the group drank coffee with caffeine, and the other half drank decaf. After they drank the coffee, they then did the brachial artery tourniquet test, which is the test which determines the endothelial function and its ability to make nitric oxide. Now, after they did the first bout where they drank the beverage and then they checked the brachial artery tourniquet test, they switched groups. So the group previously that was drinking decaf is now drinking coffee with caffeine. And they repeated the study. It was always the group that was consuming coffee with caffeine where they demonstrated endothelial dysfunction, in other words, a lessened ability to make nitric oxide.
I guess the coffee's kind of off the table, huh?
Well, unless you want to have decaf.
Okay, so for people that really feel like they need their coffee in the morning, you recommend decaf instead of
That's right.
Instead of black. All right. I think this is a question that pertains to a lot of people that are on blood thinners that will be very helpful. So this particular person has been on a whole food, plant-based diet since late October of 2019. And they have taken to it like a duck to water. But their question relates to green leafies, which we've been talking about. As this person takes warfarin slash Coumadin, and then parentheses for the rest of their life, I believe I can't load up on leafy greens any longer. I eat a little bit, but nowhere near as much as I would like to. Do you have any advice as to how I can get the benefits of eating green leafies without adversely affecting my INR? I don't know what INR is, but
yeah, that's a measure of the degree to which your blood has been thinned or
okay.
anticoagulated. And this question has been out for years, and the simple answer is this: there's no question that if you are on Coumadin or warfarin, and you have your blood thin level checked on a regular basis, if you're eating a lot of green leafy vegetables, which have an additional amount of vitamin K, which hastens the clotting, it will compromise the effect of the drug. However, I mean, I think that with people who are insightful about this and are willing to speak with their physician who is running the Coumadin, they still need not give up the green leafy vegetable, provided they do the following. If you will inform your physician that you are going to be eating a fixed certain amount of green leafy vegetables on a regular basis, they can appropriately adjust the Coumadin dose so that you will still achieve the level of anticoagulation that they seem desirable without having to sacrifice giving up some of the most nutrient and beneficial foods, green leafy vegetables. Fantastic.
So this next question is one that I know that you love answering, because you answer it in a way where you just don't mess around. How do you handle going out to dinner with people that don't eat the way you do? It's exhausting trying to find a restaurant that caters to both without having to eat lettuce all night long. What am I to do, Dr. Esselstyn?
Well, I think the first thing you do when you go to any restaurant and the waiter or the waitress comes to your table, you look them in the eye and you say, let's be sure we understand the following. I am deathly allergic to a drop of any oil. So then you together go over the menu, and you might find that you can pick up a vegetable from this offering, maybe a potato from this one, or what have you. Or maybe you don't find anything. And then you ask graciously, you'd like to see the chef. So the chef comes out and you tell the chef, look, I am deathly allergic to a drop of any oil, nothing with animal protein, no dairy, and no sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And the chef is flattered. They smile and say, be back in 23 minutes with your meal. And here comes a beautiful plate full of beans and rice, or maybe a baked potato with a vegetable. Or let's say that you're eating in a restaurant, which is kind of local. You're at home in your hometown, and you're not very hungry, so you say, I'll just have the large salad. And they come with the salad, and it comes with no dressing. So you then dip into your handbag and pull out your homemade dressing that you've made that you know is perfectly legal. You use it all the time when you travel locally. Now, it's a little bit different. If you're asked to somebody's house, and let's say that they've got a large gathering, and the large gathering means that they're going to have a buffet. So you go through the buffet line, and here are all the foods that you know you cannot ever eat, but you put small portions on your plate so you can push it around during the evening. Don't touch it, and you can eat when you get home, or you could have eaten before you ever came. Now, it gets a little delicate when you've got a smaller gathering. And let's say it's one other couple plus yourself, and your hosts are Bill and Ruth, who you've known for years, and you've really got to use your interpersonal skill in this particular setting. So you call her beforehand and you say, look, Harriet and I are really excited to come together with you at your house, but you must understand that right now I am being taken care of by this absolute monster of a physician from Ohio. And then you explain your restrictions, and it works out.
Yeah. What was it? I think it was Bill Clinton on Dave Letterman referred to you as oh God, what was it? Kind of intense, to say the least. But you get the results. Let's talk for a second about people's cholesterol levels that, for whatever reason, don't seem to be coming down the way they'd liked. And I have two back-to-back questions. So let me read them both, and then if you could answer. This first question is, I've been vegan and mostly, I think that's the problem, but I've been vegan mostly whole food plant-based for over 2 years, and my cholesterol is still around 200. The lowest it has ever gotten was 184. What am I doing wrong? So that's question number one. Question number two is, while I'm eating a whole food plant-based, I am eating a whole food plant-based diet. No processed food, oil, salt, sugar, caffeine, no fats, overt fats to speak of, but my cholesterol is well over 200. Is there something I need to do? I exercise. I'm at a complete loss. What's the answer there? Is it a food diary to see what they're doing?
Well, you can take a food diary would be a good start, but let's say that the food diary is excellent. They're absolutely careful.
Yeah.
We have to remember this, that if we have, let's say it's 1,000 people who would absolutely 100% without any deviation follow the whole food plant-based nutrition. Every single one of us has a different thermostat in our liver. That is because that's the only place you'll be getting all this cholesterol. So if you have 1,000 people, there might be some people with a cholesterol of 102, others with 140, 160, 180, 200, 220. That's just the level of cholesterol production that their body has. Now, I should confess that in our book, the level of 150 is a little bit unrealistic to ask everybody to get there, because some of them are going to have a liver production of cholesterol that is higher than 150 milligrams per deciliter. But we have to remember this. Let's say that first patient you mentioned who has had a cholesterol of 184, and that is just the level at which their liver is going to make cholesterol be produced. But there is really the important thing to remember. No number has ever caused heart disease. What causes heart disease is what is passing through your lips every day that has the capacity to injure the ability of your endothelial cells to manufacture nitric oxide, which is the molecule that is the salvation and protection of all of our blood vessels.
We've talked about that.
Now, the other thing that's so key to remember is I have had a couple of such, well, not more than a couple, a number of situations where I have suggested to people who very, very, very strongly want to lower their cholesterol without having to resort to statins. If they would try just for 2 weeks, absolutely eliminate every single grain. Oats, wheats, barley, rye, buckwheat, farro, couscous, quinoa, all that. And invariably, I've seen drops of cholesterol total between 30 and 40 points when they do this. And then
Why is that?
And that, well, because that's the, let's just say it's the substrate that their liver as the factory consumes to help make cholesterol.
Hmm.
And when they, let's say that they were worried they were at 220 and now they're come down to 180, what they then can do is one grain at a time, reintroduce it and see if they can find which grain may be the culprit. And that's pretty much my answer to that situation.
Well, yeah. Can I also say a couple things and tell me if you agree here? I think with some people too, it's important to know specifically what each fraction is, meaning like what's your total cholesterol, obviously, but then what's your HDL and your LDL and your triglycerides, because they also tell the whole story. And for somebody that has an HDL that's maybe 80 or 90, they're never going to get their total cholesterol probably down below, right, 180, 200. Would you agree with that?
If that's the level that they're maintaining, even though they're eating whole food,
right,
plant-based nutrition,
right,
it's a little unusual to have somebody eating whole food, plant-based nutrition maintain, although I've seen it, maintain an HDL of 80, because usually what happens when you're eating whole food, plant-based nutrition, which is so anti-inflammatory, your liver recognizes that and no longer makes as much HDL, because your HDL is the anti-inflammatory molecule. I think the classic example of that would be the first group of patients that I had back in the late 1980s. These are largely men who, as soon as they started eating whole food, plant-based nutrition, we noticed that their HDL was plummeting. And it was suddenly, all of them had HDLs that were below 40 milligrams per deciliter, which is the sort of the national accepted low level for men. So here they were lower than the accepted low level in their mid 30s.
Yeah.
They were losing weight. Their symptoms of heart disease and chest pain were disappearing. And when we carefully studied them, they were reversing their disease, all with a lower than normal level of HDL.
Yeah.
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 Pretty exciting stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and most physicians, they're not going to see somebody that's eating whole food plant-based and gets their total cholesterol down to what your patients did. And so that HDL is also going to come down below 40. And it tends to spook them a little bit because they're not used to it. But as we know, that's completely fine. Dr. Esselstyn, do you know, is it possible to reverse an aortic aneurysm with a whole food plant-based diet?
No, the aortic aneurysms will occur in usually two areas of the aorta. It can be in the chest, where the aorta comes right off the heart, the ascending aorta, which then curves and goes down through along your spine, right in through your abdomen. And the other ones that occur will occur in the abdomen. Now, the aneurysms occur because the same process that gives coronary artery disease can occur in the wall of the aorta. And as the inflammation from this atherosclerotic process begins on the wall of the aorta, and now what occurs is there is gradually, under this high pressure aortic system, the inflammation infiltrates the wall and begins to disrupt the collagen fibers and the muscle fibers. So suddenly we now have a segment of that aortic wall which is weakened because you have separated the collagen and the muscle fibers. And although whole food plant-based nutrition can decrease some of the inflammation, it can never rejoin those disrupted collagen fibers and muscle fibers. And so gradually there's an expansion of the aorta as this weakened area is seen on imaging as a bulge or weakening, a bulb. And the reason that those can be have to be cared for if they continue to grow is, of course, you don't want them to burst, because then the person would immediately exsanguinate. And so that's very delicate and very appropriate surgery. in patients who have an aneurysm that is beyond a certain size.
Got it. This particular person's is 4.5 centimeters.
Yeah, they're getting up to, usually it's by the time they get to 5, that's when the bell rings and it's time to get it taken care of.
Got it. That's great. Great to know all that. So this is a question that I think a lot of people that are transitioning to a whole food plant-based diet, especially in the beginning, experience. So here we go. We recently shifted to a whole food plant-based diet about 3 weeks ago. We have loved all the new recipes, but I'm noticing that my husband and I have a lot more gas. We aren't bloated, we're just gassy. Are there any things that we can do to help with this? Probiotic, Gas X, anything, Dr. Esselstyn? Help.
Yeah, I think just smile and accept the fact that you are changing your your bacteria. In other words, your intestinal bacteria, your microbiome, is going to change as you change with your diet. And those bacteria are able to metabolize some of the more complex sugars that we as humans cannot metabolize, that we eat, but those organisms are able to do that. And as a result of that, often the product of their metabolism of these complex sugars is gas, but that should ameliorate with time.
Yeah, it's funny how I find that my my particular gas is not bad at all unless I eat certain foods, like if I happen to do some sort of processed tofu. Let's just say, for example, I do like a soy dog or a soy burger. That tends to like have things act up. But it's interesting because I look at my kids who have been eating this way their whole entire lives. You know, Hope is 6, Sophie is 10, and Cole is 12, and they have I mean, very little gas to speak of. It's really remarkable to me. And when they do, it's not offensive. So kind of peculiar. Okay, so I love your smile there. All right, I have not found. So this particular person has a question about eggs. I haven't found any particular articles relating to egg whites damaging the endothelial cells. What is the scientific basis for avoiding them? I'm a big fan of you both and what you've done for heart disease mitigation. Any thought on egg whites or eggs?
Well, it's just that there are two parts of the egg that are, at least I don't like our heart patients to have, and that's the yolk, which is loaded with cholesterol. And then, of course, you have the egg white, which is animal protein. And remember that animal protein is one of the things that we feel contributes to injuring the endothelial lining. And the other thing you have to look at is, as there are obviously manufacturers of eggs who have great pride in their product, but where have they ever had a study where they have taken patients who are seriously ill with heart disease and fed them a diet full of eggs and show that you could halt and reverse this disease?
Mm-hmm.
Not a great fan of eggs.
All right, so Dr. Esselstyn, my LDL number was 189 at the end of November 2019. The doctor wanted to put me on meds, but I decided to go plant-based and slowly eased in, and I'm still going strong. How long should I wait before I get retested? I've also lost 20 pounds, and I'm hoping that my number will come down.
Yeah, well, once you've plateaued with your weight loss, and then I think it's certainly time to repeat the cholesterol findings. Because I think you want to look at your cholesterol when it's under stable conditions. I think it's going to be more accurate than if you're in a situation where you are profoundly losing every day body weight, both fat and muscle. Literally, what you're living on is is fat and muscle, and your situation, your numbers there are really not truly what your baseline would be if you were in a stable metabolic state, not losing or gaining weight. That's what
So meaning that those levels will probably continue to be a little bit elevated?
That's right. Under those circumstances, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. I know that, in our 7-day programs, and I'm sure you see this too, we get dramatic, typically 25-point loss in 7 days, but yeah. All right. How about if we take one more question? You good with that?
Let's do it.
Awesome. So I think this is one of the things that really kind of distinguishes you from a lot of people in the whole food plant-based movement. So why, Dr. Esselstyn, are nuts banned on your program?
Yeah. Well, I am a little bit of an outlier there, and I don't apologize for our success, and we will compete to challenge our results with anybody, although I must confess, on page 69 of my book, I indicate clearly that I have no hesitation about suggesting nuts or seeds for persons who do not have cardiovascular disease. On the very next page, you find that I am restricting nuts from persons who do not have, for persons who do have cardiovascular disease. Why is that? Well, number one, you'll never hear me say this, but obviously, if people were to have 1 or 2 or 3 walnut halves on their morning breakfast cereal, that probably would be okay, but you'll never hear me say that. Why? Because if I say that, then suddenly the word will get out that somebody says, I've heard Esselstyn say that nuts were okay. The reason I don't say that, if I ever say that nuts are okay, or if somebody says that because I say it's okay to have 3 half walnuts, Esselstyn said nuts is okay, that doesn't work, because then they'll be in the glove compartment. They'll be in the bathroom. They'll be in the kitchen, the bedroom, the hallway, the living room. Nuts are so highly addictive, and they're filled with saturated fat. Now, the other wrinkle that's interesting here is that let's do this. Let's look at the data. Can you show me a single study where patients who are seriously ill with heart disease were offered peanut butter, nuts, cashew sauce, and they ever had their disease halt and reverse? I'm going to be completely open-minded about that, but I've not seen that study. As a matter of fact, the one study that I'm aware of that with nuts would be the Predimed study. And in Predimed, these Italian folks who entered the study had to have a record of no identifiable cardiovascular disease to be entered into the study. There were 5,000. They were in 3 different groups. One group was having the Mediterranean diet with nuts. The other was the Mediterranean diet with olive oil. And the other was the so-called low-fat diet, which was really quite high in fat. Then they followed them for 5 years. And what did they happen to have? Well, let's look at the results. In every single group, there were scores of patients who sustained heart attack, stroke, and death. All right. In the group that was having nuts with the Mediterranean diet, 83 patients with heart attack, stroke, and death in 5 years. Those that were having the Mediterranean diet with olive oil, 96 heart attack, stroke, and death. And those that were having the low-fat diet, 109. As a matter of fact, the title of the article, when it was printed, said the prevention of cardiovascular disease with the Mediterranean diet. And when the writer from the New York Times called me and said, Dr. Esselstyn, this seems to disagree with your findings. What do you have to say about Predimed? And I said, I think you've got the title wrong, because
Yeah.
it should be the creation of cardiovascular disease with the Mediterranean diet.
They're just slowing it down, if anything, not getting to the root causation. But now you're okay though with some ground flaxseed meal, chia seeds.
No,
like
absolutely,
that, right?
yeah. At the morning, in your morning cereal, you want to have a tablespoon or two of flaxseed meal or chia seeds. That's great. If you happen to have a bun that is made and it's got a few sesame seeds in the crust, that's fine.
So I see in the background you've got about 4 different bikes. Have you been out biking at all lately?
No, they get retired during the winter time. I'm not so good in the snow.
Yeah. Well, what about that one stationary bike that I see there?
Yeah, that'll get a little workout every now and then, for sure.
Awesome, fantastic. Well, you and Mommy hunker down.
We'll get us through this virus, but we have to really, and it's going to be tough to remain housebound, but that's going to be the rule.
Yeah.
But how would it be possible to find anybody who I'd rather be housebound with than Mommy?
Yeah. I love how much you guys love being together. It's awesome. All right. Hey, thank you so much.
Thanks, Rip.
Thanks again to all of you who submitted questions to my father. No doubt we'll be doing these special episodes on a regular basis to educate, inform, and inspire. We all have to continue to control the controllables in our life, and our long-term health must take a front seat. As I said at the beginning of the podcast, it's also important to stay connected, and we invite you to join our Plant Strong community. Visit plantstrong.com for recipes, resources, and all the links to all of our social media channels. It's an uncertain time for all of us, but one thing that is certain is we will continue to be here for you. Thanks so much for listening. Next week, we have a new interview with Dr. Michael Clapper to share with you. Stay tuned. One of the best features of our Plant Strong Meal Planner is the ability to search recipes that allow you to use random ingredients from your pantry or your fridge. Our 5-minute chana masala is a super popular recipe using canned beans, diced tomatoes, frozen brown rice, and spices. It's an easy solution to the what's for dinner dilemma that everybody has. Members can search our database of hundreds of whole food, plant-based, oil-free recipes and find delicious ways to use up what you have on hand while staying plant strong. And if you need help making ingredient substitutions, guess what? Our meal planner coaches are on hand 7 days a week. Save $20 off the annual plan and use the code HEALTHNOW. That's one word, HEALTHNOW. And visit plantstrong.com and click on the meal planner today. Thank you for listening and subscribing to our show. I want you to know that we read each and every one of your reviews, and we appreciate each and every one. If you want to learn more about this season or today's guests and sponsors, please visit plantstrongpodcast.com. The Plant Strong podcast team includes Lori Kordowich, Amy Mackey, Patrick Gavin, Wade Clark, and Carrie Barrett. I want to thank my parents, Dr. Caldwell B. Esselstyn Jr. and Ann Kryl Esselstyn, for creating a legacy that will be carried on for generations and being willing to go against the current and trudge upstream to the causation. We are all better for it.